myself. This is Neha Chauhan here. I am a teacher expert at Cuemath with a teaching experience of more than 3 years. Subjects which I primarily teach are mathematics and reasoning, and the regions that I cater to are India and US. Now, I would request and suggest all the teachers, parents, and students who have joined us for today's Olympiad level masterclass to grab a notebook and a pen so that you can jot down all the important points. If you feel that there is a particular concept which is new to you, you can jot that also down for your future references. That is, whenever you're revising these topics, you would have good notes with you to revise on. Also, you'll be able to solve all the interesting and engaging questions that we'll be solving in today's masterclass. So here we start with our today's masterclass, and the first thing that we always do is the table of contents so that we get a clear picture of what all are we going to cover in today's masterclass. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll try to understand the core concept of what analogy and classification is and why do we do it. Then what are the objectives, which will be setting the types of problems that we'll be solving today's masterclass, types of problems you can expect in Olympiad level examinations, problems which would be of basic level as well as the advanced level, tricky, engaging and interesting problems. And then finally, the takeaways from today's masterclass, that is the learning outcomes. So before we start with our today's masterclass, before we actually dive in to the concept of analogy and classification, here is a quick test for yourself. It says here, daisy flower is a plant. Basically, when we're talking about daisy and a flower, these both are coming from the category of plant. So same way, when we're talking about a bungalow and then a house, they do come from which category? So there is a question mark that you can see. So you have to answer which category do they belong to. Just as daisy and flower belong to the category of plants, bungalow and a house belongs to which category? You all can put your answers in the comment section if you know the answer to this. And if not, let me just quickly answer to this. The answer to this would be the building, because these are different types of building that we have. A bungalow is basically bigger than a house. A house would have lesser number of rooms, would be smaller in size, whereas a bungalow is huge as compared to a house, would be having a lot many other rooms, more in number. So these both come in the category of building. So what we have done here is a sort of classification. Daisy, flower, they all come in the category of plant, whereas bungalow and house come in the category of buildings. So with this, we move on to the core concept of what analogy and classification is. So now let me give you, the explanation of what analogy and classification is in a very simple language. Now, analogy is something which sets a relationship, a connection, a unique connection between two objects or between two things. It could be any two things. So there is a certain connection between two things. The same connection, the same relationship can be applied to another pair. So when we have two different pairs having the same sort of connection, the same sort of relationship amongst them, we call that as analogy when we make comparison. So like, for example, I'll tell you, if you have a tomato that can be cut with a knife. So cutting of tomatoes is done with a knife. So the action of knife here is to cut tomatoes. Now if you have a tree in place, what can cut a tree? An axe can cut a tree. So the action of the axe is to cut the tree. In both the cases, the connection between the objects is exactly the same, which is cutting of the other object by the first object. That is, if you have knife, it cuts tomatoes, but the same knife cannot cut a tree, but an axe can cut a tree. So there is cutting which is happening, but we have different objects which are being cut. That is a tomato and a tree, and different tools which are cutting these objects, like tomato is being cut by a knife, whereas a tree is being cut by an axe. So this is called as analogy. And classification you've already seen, like if you have a basket which is full of vegetables and fruits, you clearly know that you can segregate them into two different categories. One having vegetables, like in vegetables you can have onion, you can have potato, cabbage, spinach, so many other types of vegetables. In fruits, you can have apples, oranges, bananas, grapes. So this is we call as classification, segregation of objects so that they do not mix into each other, and there is an underlying property which makes a certain set of objects come into one single category. how we have fruits, which is different from vegetables, and vegetables are different from herbs. So these are different categories. They have an underlying property to them, which makes them different from each other. Now let's have a look at the polished definition of what an analogy and classification is. So an analogy is a comparison between two objects or system of objects, as I said, like how we had knife and tomato, that highlights respect in which they are thought to be similar. Just as a knife is similar to an axe because a knife cuts a tomato, an axe cuts a tree. So they are similar in their action, which is cutting. So that is analogy. The phenomena of grouping various objects on the basis of their common property, which I said is an underlying property, is called as classification. So very simple example is like you can segregate if you have a basket which is full of apples, oranges, bananas. Also, it has spinach, cabbage, onion. You can segregate vegetables separately and you can segregate fruit separately. So because they have different properties to them. So that is called as classification. Now we come to the objectives. The first objective here is that we identify the relationship between different objects and find the missing figure in the other pair. So what will happen is you would be given with two different pairs. The first pair would be complete, that is, you will have both the objects or both the figures in the first pair. And there is a certain relationship which has been built up between the two figures or the two objects. The second pair would have one of the objects or the figures missing. You'll have to establish the same relationship as was given in the first pair in the second pair and thus find the missing figure or the missing object. And based on classification, we have the second objective, which is identify the property on which you can segregate the objects and find the odd one out. So that these are the two objectives which we have, which will be setting the types of problems that we solve in today's masterclass. So before we get into solving some engaging and interesting questions, let's have a look at some of the applications. So the applications which we have is that analogy is used in parts of speech such as idioms and phrases. Now idioms and phrases, I can tell you, like we always say that shine bright like a star. So the analogy here or the comparison here is that a star is always shining. So shine bright like a star. So these are the idioms and phrases wherein we make use of analogy. We make comparison. So it helps in making us comparison. And in marketing, consumer spending pattern is used for is done on classification basis. If certain people are buying a certain sort of clothes, Western or Indian, the market is bigger for which? Do we have a bigger market for Indian clothes or do we have a bigger market for Western clothes? So, you can do segregation anywhere. It could be clothing, it could be, the food items, or it could be anything wherein you can make classification and you can understand the consumer pattern. In agriculture and fishing and in defense, there are various places where we can make use of classification. Also, we can make use of analogy. With this, we come to our very first question for today's masterclass. It says, identify the relation between the given pair on either side of the double colon and find the missing figure. So this is the question that we have. Now, I'll tell you that when we're talking about this question, there are two pairs on the either side of the double colon. So this is the double colon. This is one pair, and this is supposed to be the second pair. But if you would have a closer look, you would see that the first number in the second pair is missing and has been replaced with a question mark. Now, how do we solve it? Your first objective is to understand what is the relationship between the two numbers in the first pair. You'll have to establish the same relationship between the two numbers in the second pair. So we see that 4 is double of 2, or else we can say 2 is half of 4. So we'll go backwards because the first number is missing. So we have to come to the first number from the second number. So what we understood is that the second number is half of the first. So 4 is half of which number? It's definitely not 3, definitely not 6, and definitely not 5. But the correct answer is 8, because if you would have 8, half of 8 is 4, or we can say that 8 is double of 4. So the correct answer to this question becomes option D. Hoping all of you would have understood this question, we move on to our next question, which says, identify the relation between the given pair, again on either sides of the colon, double colon. So you see there is one pair on the left side, which is complete. It has both the objects. But the pair which is on the right side of the double colon is incomplete because the second option, the second object in the pair has been replaced with a question mark, and that is the object that you need to find, the missing figure. So these are the options that we have. So now we'll have to understand what is the relationship that exists between the two objects in the first pair. So we have a book and we have a pen. So we write with the help of a pen in the book. Now this is the second pair we have, in which the second object is missing, replaced with a question mark. Now, does bat have any relationship with the wallet? No. We cannot do, we cannot play with a bat and a wallet. We cannot play with a bat and an ice cream. We cannot play with a bat and a cup, but we can definitely play with the help of a ball with a bat. So the answer that comes in this missing figure is basically a ball, because with the help of a ball we can play cricket along with a bat. So this is how we solve this problem. Moving on to our next question. All of you can quickly answer these questions if you already know the answers quick enough in the comment section. And if you have any doubts, you can also post that in the comment section and we'll be addressing to all of those queries. So again, we have a pair on the right side, which is incomplete, but on the left side, which is complete. So we have a ball, which is related to bat, because these two form a pair. A ball and a bat is wherein we can play cricket. They are a pair. So which is the pair that we form with a racket, a badminton racket. So let's have the options in place. So what you have to understand is that we could have had, one of the balls also as the correct answer, but this does not look like the racket from lawn tennis, but it looks like a racket from the game of badminton. And hence, these three would be ruled out, and the answer to this question would be option A, which is a shuttlecock. So because a racket from lawn tennis will have wider this section. The handle would be a bit wider and it doesn't look like so. But in a badminton, we have a thinner handle. So this racket is not from the sport of lawn tennis, but it is from badminton. And badminton is played with the help of a racket and a shuttlecock. So the answer to this question becomes option A. We quickly move on to our next question. Okay, so figure 1 and figure 2 are related to each other in some manner. We need to figure out that manner. And then we need to establish the same relationship between the figures in 3 and 4. So the fourth figure is actually missing. We'll have to figure that out. Let's see. Let's have a look at the options. These are all the options that we have. So again, the first step is to understand the relationship between the figure 1 and figure 2. So figure 1 has a shape which is triangle at the outside, and in the inside we have a shape which is a circle. In the second figure, what has happened is the positioning of the figures, the shapes has changed or has swapped. They've interchanged their places. That is, now at the outside we have a circle, which is this, and the triangle has gone in. It is now a shape which is inside the circle. So in figure 3, we have a square at the outside and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a pentagon in the inside. So what will happen here is that the pentagon will go outside in figure 4 and the square would come in. So the only figure that we have of the same sort wherein the pentagon has gone out and the square has come in is option A. So this becomes the correct answer to our question. I hope you all understood the relation here. The figure which is at the outside initially goes inside and the shape which was at the inside goes outside. So we did the same thing, square comes inside and pentagon goes outside. Quickly moving on to our next question. It says find the odd one out. So we have basically 4 numbers here, 2, 4, 6 and 7. So it's very easy. I think most of you would be able to answer this question. 2 can be written as 2 times 1. 4 can be written as 2 times 2. 6 can be written as 2 times 3. But 7 can be written just as 7 times 1. So the first 3 are all even numbers or all are the multiples of 2. 2, 4, 6 are all the multiples of 2. They are all even numbers, but 7 is an odd number and is not a multiple of 2. So the odd one out here clearly becomes option B. With this, we move on to our next question again, which is based on finding the odd one out. Okay, we have a set of clothing here, and let's have a look at how is any of these different from the rest. So we have a cardigan sort of clothing in option A, then a shirt, and then a raincoat. So these three, the starting three, are worn in the upper body. They're worn in the upper body, whereas a sock that we see in option D is again a clothing, but it's worn in the feet and not in the upper body. So the first three clothings that we see, the piece of clothing that we see are for the upper body, whereas the sock that we see in option D is for the feet, which comes in the lower body. So the odd one out here is option D. So this is an easy question. I hope all of you could understand this question and were able to answer it. With this, we will move on to our next question, again, which is based on finding the odd one out. Okay, so let's see how many of you can answer this. Now, we'll have to understand the property wherein, three of them are same, but one of them would not be same. We have in option A shape which is outside, which is a square, and inside we have a circle. Now the circle is touching all the sides of the square. Okay, so there is no side of square which is not being touched by the circle, which is the shape inside the square. In option B also we have the same thing. There is a quadrilateral. We have got a four-sided shape, a quadrilateral, and then there is a circle which is inside. Again, it is touching all the sides of the outer shape. There is no side which has not been touched by the circle inside. In option C, we again say the same thing. The circle is touching all the four sides of the outer shape. But in option D, if you would see, the circle is touching only two of the sides. These two sides remain untouched by the circle. So the first three followed the same pattern of touching all the four sides of the outer shape, whereas option D did not follow the same. So this becomes the odd one out here. Hoping all of you would have again understood this question. I would move on to the next question, which is of advanced level. So you have a double colon again. So there is a pair on the left side which is complete, but on the right side it's incomplete because the second figure is missing in the second pair. We'll have to establish or understand the certain relationship which exists between the first two figures in the first pair, and then establish the same relationship with the first figure and the second figure of the second pair. So let's have a quick look at the options that we have. So these are all the options. Now the first thing again that we do is understand the relation between the figures in the first pair, which are these two figures. So we had the lines inside the square perpendicular to each other. So we can say that the angle here is 90 degrees. And then the lines inside the square have moved or rotated in clockwise direction by 45 degrees. They have moved like this, so that the lines have now have become diagonal in the square. So we would do the same thing here. The lines which are making an angle of 90 degree here would be rotated in clockwise direction by 45 degrees. So we'll then have a circle like this. The lines which were initially this way would now become in cross way like this, and the dot moves along. As we saw that the dot moved along with this quarter of the square and was here, so this dot would also move and would come here. So the correct answer to this question becomes option D, because this exactly matches to what we drew, and what we understood was the relationship between the figures in the first pair. With this, we move on to our next question. Okay, so the first two figures are again related in a certain way. We have to establish the same relationship between the first figure and the second figure in the second pair. The second figure in the second pair is missing. The first thing we do is to understand the relation. Now, the first circle here was shaded, the rest two were unshaded. In the next figure, that has been swapped. Shapes or the circles which were unshaded become shaded, and the shaded part becomes unshaded. That is the first circle, we can mark them as circle 1, circle 2, circle 3. 2 and 3 were unshaded, but in the second figure, these both have become shaded. And the one which was shaded, which was circle 1, became unshaded. So we'll do the same thing here. We'll have the same figure drawn. The part which was shaded will become unshaded, and the unshaded part will become shaded. So the only shape that way is option D here. So this is the missing figure or the fourth figure in the question. So the shaded becomes unshaded, the unshaded becomes the shaded was the logic or was the relation between the two figures in the first pair, and we did the same in the second pair as well to get to the answer. Now we come to question number 3, which is to find the odd one out. We have got 4 different shapes, 4 different figures basically in the 4 options. We need to figure out the one which is the odd one out here. So we'll be going in with the first figure in option A. What we see here is that there is a line which is drawn which divides the given figure in 2 halves. Now if I would try to fold this half, which is this side, onto the other side, they would completely overlap each other. Also, this Z kind of shape would be completely covering each other. They are exactly the replicas, we can say kind of mirror images. Now, if we come to the figure in option B, it's the same thing. There is a line which is dividing the given figure into 2 halves. If I would fold the upper half onto the lower half, it would exactly match it. The Y also would exactly come over the Y at the bottom and would not be a mismatch. It would be a perfect match. So in option C, the figure that we have again has got a line. If I try to fold one part onto the other part, it would completely match, completely overlap without any mismatch. So basically we can say that all 3 of these are the lines of symmetry. Now what does a line of symmetry do? In a line of symmetry, along the line you fold the figure. The one part which is being folded onto the other part would be an exact replica and would overlap each other exactly without being less or being more. It perfectly fits it. But coming to option D, if you would see, if you would fold this figure along this line, this unshaded part would not match with this unshaded part, and this shaded part would not match with this shaded part. So this is not a line of symmetry. So for the first 3 figures, the line which is being drawn is the line of symmetry, but for this option, option D, the line that we have in this figure is not the line of symmetry. So the odd one out here is clearly the option D. So I hope you understood this question of how you could categorize 3 of the figures in one pocket, and the fourth one was the odd one out. With this, we move on towards the learning outcomes for today's session. So what we saw here was predicting individual differences between pairs of elements and carefully observing the options to choose the odd one out, how we understood how you can categorize different objects in one pocket and find the odd one out. Also, we did analyze a lot of figures in both type of questions, which was based on odd one out, also based on analogy. So with this, it's almost the wrap of today's masterclass. I hope you all enjoyed the masterclass today, and specifically an announcement for all the teachers and parents who wish to register their children for TUCO 2020. The registrations are already open. Towards the end of this masterclass, you will be getting all the details that you require to get your child registered for TUCO 2020, which is the ultimate Cuemath Olympiad 2020. I hope you all register and have an amazing experience of national level Olympiad examination, which is the TUCO 2020. So as we all saw in today's masterclass, how logical reasoning inculcates the ability to think logically in a child, they start thinking in an innovative manner. They also strive to get to the answer in the shortest possible way. And this is exactly how a student gets trained by a Cuemath expert, and all of it is being provided in Olympiad masterclasses by Cuemath. So with this, I would like to introduce the TUCO registration forms. Every student who wishes to take up the real-time Olympiad examination by Cuemath, please go ahead and click on the link given in the description box below. The registration amount for TUCO is ₹200 only, and the benefits that you get on registering for TUCO is that you get a complete course curriculum to prepare for it, which is worth rupees 5,000. So every time we have a masterclass, an Olympiad masterclass as we had today, which is scheduled, you can join us there and then later can work on extensive sheets on the same topic through the course curriculum provided when you register for TUCO. So make sure you do not delay and register yourself to get the most out of the curriculum worth rupees 5,000 just for rupees 200. And with this, we'll be winding up